Nissman, and I am speaking to you from my music studio here in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. How I wish I were talking to you from this stage, but unfortunately we're not there yet. Hopefully we'll be there sometime soon. But I thought it would be fun to invite you into my studio and chat with you today about one of my favorite composers. I spent a lot of hours here chipping away to get closer to the character and spirit of the Russian composer Sergei Prokofiev. And maybe some of you grew up with his music if you remember Peter and the Wolf. I certainly do. But he's left the pianist with such a wonderful legacy of piano music. And I think this man, whom I believe is the giant of the 20th century, has really suffered from being misunderstood. He frequently is misunderstood musically, politically, personally, spiritually. And I think the problem we have with Prokofiev is we don't know what box to put him in. I mean, if you ask some people, they'll say, oh, he's too conservative, he's too traditional. And then other people will say, no, he's too dissonant, he's too modern. So one thing is sure is that Prokofiev always went his own way. He was a true original. He was not a member of any school of composers, nor a follower of any composition group. He was truly just Prokofiev, and his music sounds like Prokofiev, like no one else. And let me give you a little background about him. He was born in a small village in the Ukraine. His father was the land manager for a big estate that employed serfs. So Prokofiev grew up, and he was quite a precocious child. I mean, it was obvious he was a child prodigy, because by the age of 3, he was already picking out melodies. By the age of 4, I believe he was writing them down and composing his own compositions. I think he even composed an opera when he was 9 years old. And of course, his mother, being an amateur pianist, recognized the prodigious talent of her son. And she used to employ the Russian composer Glier to come down there for the summer and tutor him. And eventually the decision was made that he had to enroll in a professional conservatory. So he was sent off with his mother accompanying him to the St. Petersburg Conservatory of Music. And I believe he must have been the youngest student they ever had in their history. And of course, even there, he made a name for himself. He earned the nickname, the bad boy of the keyboard. Because, you know, there was Prokofiev in counterpoint class, and of course he wasn't following the rules. He was doing his own thing. So I thought it would be fun, before we get to the sonata I want to discuss with you, his 7th sonata, to play for you the piece that earned him that nickname. And he wrote this piece when he was only 17 years old, still at conservatory, and it's called Suggestion diabolique, diabolical suggestions. And I always have fun when I play this piece for children, because, boy, they conjure up the most wonderful ghost stories. I just played the introduction for them. Let me play this introduction, and you'll see what a great storyteller Prokofiev is. And then the story begins. piece, isn't it? And it's so much fun to play and practice. And you can see what a wonderful pianist Prokofiev must have been. And you can see what I'm saying. He built on that Liszt tradition, the 19th century tradition, but he added to it. He added his own pianism, and his virtuosity was such an important part of his piano style. And what's amazing about Prokofiev is he never tore down the old. He built on the old to create something new and modern that was uniquely his own. So in other words, when you analyze his music, when you take away all the dissonance and you really go to the core of what he's doing, it's traditional harmonies. It's always tonal. And what he does, though, is, of course, make it personal. So he'll add his own spice to it. And I always compare Prokofiev to a chef in the kitchen who likes a lot of spices. You know, maybe a Cajun chef who will take a normal recipe but really spice it up. That's Prokofiev. But you also heard that wonderful motoric energy that kind of keeps going and takes you along with it. And that's also a characteristic of his music. So it's quite amazing. He wrote this at 17, but already here you see so many of the seeds that would be developed later. And of course those sharp accents and syncopations, those jabs, that sarcastic wit of his that of course comes through in his later compositions. So he was in St. Petersburg Conservatory. He finished, and he was making his way, you know, playing concerts, composing. And then in 1918, the revolution broke out, and Prokofiev made the decision, and it was a fateful decision, actually, that he made, a brave one, to get out of town. So he grabbed the last train out of Russia and headed for America by way of Japan, landed in San Francisco, and in 1918, he was in New York City. He played and he composed and traveled around and settled eventually in Paris. So he was in Paris in the 20s, and this was also the center of musical culture. Diaghilev and the Ballet Russe were there, Stravinsky was there, and Balanchine was there, and but Prokofiev was not quite happy there. It was not a very good time for him because mainly, I think, and this is my theory, he was always under the shadow of Stravinsky. And no matter how he wrote, he could never please the Parisians. He was not modern enough for them. And he wrote to a friend, I am in danger of losing my own voice. I need to go back home. I need to hear my own language so I can be creative again. He knew that it was a matter of survival. So he made another faithful decision to take his family, his wife and his two sons, and go back to his homeland. Now, of course, the homeland he was going back to wasn't the homeland he left. He left Russia. He was now going back to the Soviet Union. So, and of course he was wined and dined. This decision was not taken lightly, nor was it a political decision. This is what I mean. People have judged him for that. I think it was an artistic decision. It was his survival. I don't think his creative voice might not have lasted if he hadn't made that decision. So, and also think of the works he was able to compose there. Romeo and Juliet, Peter and the Wolf, Kiji, Nevsky, the 5th, 6th, 7th symphonies, and the 3 war sonatas. And I want to talk to you about one of the war sonatas. It's his most famous, the 7th sonata, and recently I pulled it out because I was preparing it for performance. And let me first of all say that the reason for the nickname is not because they depict war, although you might think so when you hear some of the first movement of the 7th sonata. No, it's because he started these pieces in 1939. And actually he started them all together, the 6th, 7th, and the 8th. And Prokofiev was the kind of man who worked like a clock, you know. He never wanted to lose a moment, so if he ran into a snag in one sonata, he could always go to the next sonata. But the 7th is the most compact. It has 3 movements, and the other 2 sonatas have 4 movements each. So I thought I would walk you through it, movement by movement. So it would be easy for you to follow what Prokofiev is doing and the decisions I have to make. And let's start with the first movement of the Seventh Sonata. Now, what's interesting, he writes over the tempo, he says, allegro inquieto. In other words, a nervous allegro, an unquiet allegro. So in that first measure, the performer has to create that mood. We can't wait to do it on this till the second page. I mean, it has to be immediate. So he gives us a unison theme, which means two hands are playing the same thing. And of course, he gives you the tonality of B flat. There it is. Now, I have to decide how to play it. Now, I could play it like this. I don't really like that. Or I could play it. I don't like that either because it's not nervous enough. That's what he wants. So that's what I do. Something in between. And then he gives us an interjection. Now, Prokofiev does this so often. He brings on a cast of character to interrupt the theme and give their commentary. You know, they kind of comment on what's going on. And I call this the Beethoven fifth interjection. Sounds like da-da-da-dum, right? So he does this. So let me start again. And then he goes back. Get the B flat. B flat. And he gives you B natural. He goes, and he gives you that wonderful second. And that's so typical of his style. Another interjection. And he goes, there's the theme. Beethoven. All these interjections, it's like he's commenting as we're going along, you know? So anyway, you remember the form of the sonata. I think I explained it in the Moonlight, but let me review it. The first part, it's in three parts, the sonata form. So the first part has two themes, and they're contrasting. So you heard now the first theme. Now what Prokofiev does, he really gives us a contrasting theme. My goodness. From this vertical theme, he gives us this extended lyrical horizontal line, and he marks it dolente, mourning. So it sounds like this. Whole different character. And the line has to keep going. And that's your second theme. And then what he does is, Prokofiev is such a master craftsman. He disguises the seams. In other words, we're going now from the exposition into the development. I said that was the middle section. That's the conflict. That's where all the motives are fighting with each other, and you're going to hear that. But Prokofiev kind of disguises these seams. In other words, that development kind of creeps in. We don't even notice it. And then because the rhythm keeps it going, and then... So in other words, it's not sectionalized, and I will explain as we go along. And so after the development, then he'll come back, and we come back to the return. Remember the peaceful return, the resolution? Well, what Prokofiev does is he doesn't give us that first theme again. Well, he's used it a lot in the development. He really starts the return with the second theme. Same theme, different game. And what he does is he saves that first theme for the coda. Remember, the coda is the tacked on ending. So when the coda comes, first theme. So that's what he does formally. Now for Prokofiev, form was very important. And that's another thing I love about his music. He always lets us know where we are. He's so direct in his music making, and there's never any filler, and there's never any ambiguity about where we're going. And I think it's related to the fact that he was such a great chess player, with that kind of mind that could, strategize all these brilliant moves. And that's Prokofiev. And he does that with form. He uses the same form Beethoven uses, but makes it his own. So let me walk you through that first movement, and I think you'll be able to follow with me where we are and where we're going. So this is the Allegro Inquieto. that's the first movement. I hope you could follow that and you could see the way he uses all those motives. I mean, in a way, he's just like Beethoven with his motivic technique. He copied Beethoven with that. And he's a master craftsman. And boy, the way the sonata holds together. And you know, it really holds together because he ends it the way he began it. And then he just kind of slips off. Now we come to the romantic second movement. And this is another misconception about Prokofiev that I've been trying to change. So many people have this stereotype that, oh, he only wrote cold, hard music, and he's hard-hearted, etc., etc. Now, that just is not true, because, and this second movement, I think, is proof of that romantic, tender soul he has inside, that he doesn't really like to, you know, wear on the surface, but I mean, if you peel away all the layers, it's really there. I always say Prokofiev has the soul of the soft Russian teddy bear under there, and you will hear that in this romantic second movement. You will also hear how much he owes to the pianism of Liszt. And of course, he's just built upon that and made it his own and enlarged it. So this movement is in 3 parts, and I'll be able to walk you through it and tell you when the second part begins, but it's really beautifully put together, and the writing is so wonderful. The pianism is so wonderful. And only a pianist, I believe, could have written a sonata like this. Now you see why he marks it andante caloroso, a warm andante, and you get a glimpse into that romantic soul of Prokofiev. It's such a gorgeous movement, especially when it stands in between those two very powerful movements. Now, we'll go to the finale, which is, I think, the most famous movement. In a way, it's a pianist's rite of passage to learn this sonata, and everybody plays this. And I think what performers have to watch in this last movement, because it's an ostinato, where the rhythm keeps getting more excited. We have to, first of all, we have to pace our stamina so we can save it for that last page where he's really hammering those B flats. And also, we have to allow enough contrast. I mean, you don't want to just barrel through this, even though it's very popular with audiences because of that rhythmic momentum, but there's much more to it than that. There's a lot of contrast in here. In fact, he gives us this wonderful theme. It kind of changes the character, but of course, in ostinato, the rhythm keeps going. Now, let me give you an idea of what Prokofiev does. He puts it in 7/8. 7 beats to a measure, and this is your theme. And so eventually, when he keeps repeating da 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 da, and eventually, I always say to myself, okay, I got it. I understand what you're saying. It's as if he's jabbing us in the ribs with those accents. And of course, as I play, as the piece progresses, it will get stronger, and you'll see that that sarcastic wit of his come through. Now, that sarcastic wit also got him personally in trouble with a lot of people. A lot of people didn't understand his directness and his honesty. And I mean, he had beefs with Rachmaninoff, with Stravinsky, with Balanchine, with Diaghilev, but and actually he meant well. He wasn't being malicious. He was just being honest. So you hear this directness in his music and that wonderful wit and sarcasm. So let me give you an idea of the finale, the famous finale. And also you'll notice I'm going to start it softly, the way Prokofiev asks to start it. And then all of a sudden, it's like he turns the radio volume up. He starts turning the knobs. got this wonderful rhythm that keeps going and going. And he knew how to write for the piano. And what's wonderful is he built on the old to create the new and make it original and modern. And that's our man Prokofiev. And I intend to visit another sonata with you again soon, because there's so much to share with you about him. And his music gives a lot of joy. He wrote with joy, and I think sometimes that's overlooked in so many performances, because, you know, he was this natural talent. It had to come out of him, and it did, no matter what mood. I mean, there was that joie de vivre that his music contained. And the irony of Prokofiev's life, and it really is sad, that the moment he chose to die, and it was in 1953, in March, I think March 5th, was the same day that Stalin died. And there weren't enough flowers to be had in Moscow to put on Prokofiev's grave. And that is the sadness, that he had to die the same time as his kind of enemy. But there's so much of this wonderful music for you to explore. His symphonies, his operas, his ballets. It's a lifetime of enjoyment and music making and just a lot of joy and bliss. So thank you so much for letting me visit, and this has been fun for me to share this music of my favorite composer with you, and till next time.